Use slow, cinematic narration, soft ambient music under dialogue. Sarah had learned exactly how invisible a person could be, by sitting alone in a room full of wolves. The Moonridge mating ceremony glittered beneath the harvest moon. Lanterns swung from carved wooden poles, casting warm gold light over silk dresses, polished boots, hopeful faces. Everyone smelled like anticipation. Everyone except her. Sarah sat at the very back of the clearing, fingers knotted in her lap, spine straight despite the familiar ache curling in her chest. She wore pale blue tonight, not because it flattered her, but because her grandmother once said it made her look gentle, as if gentleness could save her. This was her fourth ceremony, fourth time wearing hope like borrowed clothing, fourth time pretending she didn't already know how this would end. But laughter rippled through the crowd as Alpha Rider stepped forward to claim Liana, tall, golden, perfect. Applause followed them like approval from the moon itself. Sarah clapped too. Quietly. When her name was called, the clearing fell silent. "Sarah of Moon Ridge," Alpha Blackwood announced. She stood. The silence stretched. No boots moved. No Alpha stepped forward. No claim was made. Whispers slithered through the crowd. The runt, still unmated. How embarrassing. Her wolf stirred weakly inside her, small and trembling, as if ashamed to be seen. Then, the ground shuddered. A presence rolled through the clearing like thunder restrained by skin. Sarah turned. He stood at the edge of the firelight, massive, dark, unmistakably Alpha. His shoulders were broad enough to block the lantern glow, but his expression carved from something colder than stone. Shadow followed him like a living thing. Every wolf felt him. Every Alpha stiffened. His gaze locked onto her. And then he walked forward. Each step silenced the crowd further until even the wind seemed to hold its breath. He stopped directly in front of Sarah, towering over her, eyes like storm-cut obsidian. He leaned down, just enough for only her to hear. "Act like you're mine," he murmured. Her breath caught. "Before we begin, if you love dark lichen kings, forbidden mates, and stories that make your heart ache, like this video, subscribe and step into the pack. Because these stories only get deeper from here." Before she could speak, his hand wrapped around her wrist, firm, claiming, undeniable, and he lifted it high. "I claim her." The words slammed into the clearing like a verdict. Gasps erupted. Shock fractured faces. Alpha Blackwood surged to his feet. "You cannot—" "She's unmated," the giant Alpha said calmly, "and willing." All eyes turned to Sarah. Her heart hammered. Fear screamed at her to pull away, to run back to her lonely seat and pretend none of this had happened. But she was so tired of being unchosen. She lifted her chin. "I'm willing," she said. The giant Alpha's grip tightened, just slightly. "Good," he said, "because you're coming with me." The crowd erupted into chaos. Alpha Blackwood's voice cut through the noise. "This is unprecedented. We don't even know who you are." The stranger turned, his presence alone silencing the uproar. "Darian Ashford," he said. "Alpha of Shadow Peak." A collective intake of breath swept through the clearing. Shadow Peak. The name alone carried weight, whispered in cautionary tales, spoken with respect tinged with fear. A pack that lived in the harshest mountains, that valued strength above all else, that hadn't attended a mating ceremony in over a decade. "Shadow Peak," Alpha Blackwood repeated slowly. "You come here to our territory and claim one of our own without so much as a greeting?" "She was unclaimed," Darian said flatly. "That makes her available. Unless Moonridge has changed its laws." Sarah felt the tension crackling between them like lightning waiting to strike. The laws stand, Blackwood said through gritted teeth. But this is legal, Darian finished. Now, if you'll excuse us. He began to walk, still holding Sarah's wrist. She had two choices, follow or be dragged. She chose to walk. The crowd parted like water before them, faces a blur of shock, pity, and in some cases, vindication. As if they'd always known she'd end up with someone desperate enough to claim her. Leanna reached out as they passed. Sarah, you don't have to. Yes, Sarah said quietly. I do. Because the alternative was another year of sitting alone. Another ceremony watching everyone else find their place. Another night wondering what was so fundamentally wrong with her that not even the most desperate alpha had ever looked her way. Until now. They reached the edge of the clearing before Darian finally spoke again. You'll need to say goodbye to your family. I don't have family, Sarah said. Just my grandmother. She passed 2 winters ago. He glanced at her, something unreadable flickering across his face. Friends, then. Sarah thought of the empty cottage she returned to each night. The healer, Thomas, who was kind but busy. The pack members who smiled but never invited her to gatherings. I'll be quick, she said. He released her wrist. For a moment, she thought he might be testing her, seeing if she'd run. She didn't. 1 hour, he said. Then we leave. Sarah nodded and turned toward the path that would take her home one last time. Behind her, she heard Blackwood approach Darian. You're making a mistake, the Moonridge Alpha said quietly. She's weak. Her wolf barely exists. Then she won't be your problem anymore, Darian replied. Sarah kept walking, spine straight, even as the words hit like stones against her back. Weak. Her wolf barely exists. And the truth she'd carried her entire life, spoken aloud as if it were simple fact. Maybe it was, but at least now she was someone's problem. Even if that someone was a stranger, even if the claim was a lie, it was still more than she'd had an hour ago. The cottage felt smaller than she remembered. Sarah moved through the rooms mechanically, packing what little she owned. Clothes that had seen better days. The silver brush her grandmother had given her. A journal filled with pressed flowers and half-written thoughts. She paused at the mirror. The girl looking back was ordinary. Brown hair that never quite behaved. Eyes that were neither striking nor memorable. A face that disappeared in crowds. Act like you're mine. The words echoed. She wondered what it would be like to actually be chosen. Not as a political necessity, but as someone worth wanting. A knock at the door startled her. Thomas stood on the threshold, healer's bag in hand, face creased with worry. I heard, he said. Sarah, you can't. This is Shadow Peak we're talking about. I know. Do you? He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. They're not like us. They don't value gentleness or patience. They value strength, survival. You'll be alone, she finished. I'm already alone, Thomas. His expression softened with pity she didn't want. You're not weak, he said quietly. Everyone thinks I am. Your wolf isn't weak, he insisted. Just dormant. I've studied cases like yours. Sometimes a wolf waits for the right moment, the right alpha, she said bitterly. 4 ceremonies, Thomas. 4 years of waiting. If my wolf was going to wake up, it would have by now. He was silent for a moment, then sighed and reached into his bag. Then take these. He pressed several small pouches into her hands. For pain, for sleep, for infection. And this, he pulled out a small vial of dark liquid. If you ever need to leave quickly and quietly. Sarah's throat tightened. Thomas, promise me you'll be careful, he said. Promise me if it gets too dangerous, you'll come back. We'll find another way. She nodded, even though they both knew she wouldn't. There was no coming back from being rejected by Shadow Peak. After Thomas left, Sarah finished packing in silence. She wrote a short note thanking Alpha Blackwood for his hospitality over the years, a formality, nothing more, and left it on the table. Yes, then she locked the door to the only home she'd ever known and walked toward a future that terrified her. Darian was waiting exactly where she'd left him. He stood like a shadow made solid, patient in a way that suggested he could wait forever if needed. When he saw her approach with a single worn pack, his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "That's everything?" he asked. "That's everything," she confirmed. He studied her for a long moment, as if trying to understand how a person could fit an entire life into something so small. Then he turned and began walking toward the forest. Sarah followed. They walked in silence for nearly an hour, leaving the warm glow of Moonridge far behind. The trees grew denser, the air colder, the path less traveled. Finally, when they were deep enough that no one could overhear, Darian stopped. Sarah braced herself. This was it. The moment he'd explained the real reason he'd claimed her. The catch. The price. "Don't thank me," Darian said abruptly. Sarah froze. "I wasn't going to," she replied, voice hoarse. That earned her a sharp glance. Amusement flickered briefly, then vanished. Good. She didn't want gratitude. She wanted truth. They stood beneath towering pines, moonlight broken into jagged silver shards. His presence pressed in on her from every side. Alpha dominance, old power, something dangerous and controlled with effort. "You claimed me," she said. "Why?" Darian studied her for a long moment, as if weighing whether she was worth honesty. Then he spoke. "Because I needed a mate." The words landed hard, not wanted, needed. "Shadow Peak law," he continued. "An alpha must be mated before his 30th winter. I turned 30 in 2 months." Sarah's chest tightened. "And if you aren't?" "The council challenges my rule," he said flatly. "I either step down or fight every male who thinks he could take my place." Her pulse spiked. "And you chose me because you were unmated, willing, and had nothing to lose." That hurt more than the whispers ever had. But it was honest. "And what do I get?" she asked quietly. Darian's eyes darkened. "Protection, status, a place where no one will ever dare touch you again without consequence." "And affection?" she asked, already knowing. "No." The word was immediate, unflinching. "This is not a romance, Sarah of Moonridge," he said. "It's survival. For both of us." Silence stretched between them, heavy, brutal. She should have walked away. She should have gone back to her grandmother's cottage, to loneliness that was at least familiar. But she thought of the empty bench, the laughter, the years slipping by while everyone else found forever. "How dangerous is Shadow Peak?" she asked. Darian's jaw tightened. "They'll hate you," he said. "On principle. Because you're weak. Because you're foreign. Because I chose you." Her wolf whimpered. "They'll test you, push you, try to break you or drive you out." "And you?" she asked. "Will you protect me?" "From real danger," he said. "Yes? From every challenge?" "No, if I do, they'll never respect you. You'll always be my burden." The truth burned, but it didn't feel like cruelty. It felt like a warning. "Then why tell me all this?" she asked. "Because you deserve to choose with your eyes open," Darian said. "I won't trap you with pretty lies." She exhaled shakily. "Can I say no?" "Yes." The word surprised her. "I'll take you back. Tonight. No one will stop you." Sarah closed her eyes. She imagined returning to the ceremony's ashes, to another year of being unseen. Then she opened them. "For the first time in my life," she said, voice steady despite the fear roaring inside her. Someone chose me. Darian watched her carefully. Even if it's politics, she continued, even if you need me more than you want me, that still means something. Her hands curled into fists. I'm not throwing that away without a fight. Something unreadable crossed his face. Very well, he said. We leave now. He shifted before she could respond. One moment he was a man, the next a massive black wolf, scarred and powerful, eyes gleaming with an intelligence that made her breath catch. He lowered himself slightly, unclearly expecting her to climb on. Sarah hesitated only a moment before pulling herself onto his back, fingers gripping the thick fur at his shoulders. Then they ran. The world blurred into shadow and silver, wind tearing at her hair, heart pounding with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. Darian moved like liquid night, powerful strides eating up the miles effortlessly. Hours passed. The land changed beneath them. The air grew sharper, colder, heavy with wild magic that made her skin prickle. Trees became sparse, then gave way to rock and mist. When Darian finally slowed, Sarah lifted her head. Her breath caught. A valley stretched before them, cradled between two massive peaks that seemed to scrape the sky itself. Mist coiled through the ravines like living things. Stone structures rose from the mountainside, not built, but carved. Done as if the mountain had grown them deliberately. Shadow Peak. Even from a distance, Sarah could feel eyes on her, watching, judging, waiting. Darian shifted back to human form, barely breathing hard despite the hours of running. This is where you prove you belong, he said quietly. Before Sarah could respond, shapes materialized from the mist. Wolves. Dozens of them, larger than any she'd seen at Moon Ridge, eyes gleaming with predatory curiosity. They didn't approach, but they didn't need to. Their presence alone was a warning. One figure stepped forward. A woman, tall and battle-scarred, with eyes sharp enough to cut. She looked Sarah up and down with an expression that made clear exactly what she thought of what she saw. That's it? The woman said flatly. That's what you brought home, Darian? Sarah lifted her chin, and refusing to shrink despite the obvious disdain. Kara, Darian said, voice carrying a note of warning. Kara Steelclaw. Sarah recognized the name from old stories. The Shadow Peak Beta, legendary for her combat prowess, feared even by alphas from other territories. She's human-sized, Kara continued. I can smell her wolf from here, barely a whisper. This is supposed to be your mate? She's willing, Darian said. That's all that matters. Is it? An older voice echoed from deeper within the valley. The crowd parted. 5 figures emerged. The council elders, Sarah realized. Ancient wolves whose power preceded them like a physical force. The center elder spoke, voice like grinding stone. Darian Ashford, you bring a mate from foreign pack. Yes. Unchosen, unbonded, weak. The words hit like blows, but Sarah kept her spine straight. Mate, she's mine, Darian said firmly. Then she is subject to our laws, the elder replied, as all mates brought to Shadow Peak are. A cold dread settled in Sarah's stomach. We invoke the right of assessment. Darian went rigid beside her. Elder, that hasn't been invoked in 70 years, the elder finished. Yet the law remains. 3 trials, combat, knowledge, endurance. Sarah's heart hammered. Fail even one, the elder continued, and the mate bond is ruled invalid. She leaves our territory. Forever. Silence fell like snow. Every eye turned to Sarah. She could feel their expectations, their certainty that she would fail, that she didn't belong, that this would all be over before it truly began. Darian turned to her, something like regret flickering in his eyes. "You don't have to accept," he said quietly. "I brought you here. I'll take you back." Sarah looked at the assembled pack, at Kara's contemptuous expression, at the elders' cold assessment, at the wolves who'd already dismissed her as unworthy. Then she looked at Darian, the alpha who'd been honest with her, even when honesty was cruel. "I accept," she said clearly. Shock rippled through the crowd. "You understand what you're agreeing to?" the elder pressed. "I do." It was a lie. She had no idea what these trials would truly demand. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was done running from being unwanted. If Shadow Peak wanted to break her, they'd have to try. Kara stepped forward, a slow smile spreading across her face. "I'll take combat," she said. "At noon tomorrow." The elder nodded. "So it is decided." As the crowd dispersed, Sarah caught fragments of whispered conversations. "Won't last an hour. Kara will destroy her." What was he thinking? Darian touched her elbow lightly, guiding her toward the mountain keep. "There's still time to change your mind," he said. Sarah watched the sun beginning to rise over the peaks. 12 hours until her first trial. 12 hours until she faced a warrior who could probably kill her with one hand tied behind her back. "No," Sarah said softly. "There isn't." Low, ominous ambience. Wind, distant wolves. The moment Darian Ashford said her name, the Moon Ridge clearing stopped feeling real. Sarah barely remembered leaving the ceremony. She remembered hands parting crowds for them, remembered Alpha Blackwood's fury, remembered Leanna's wide eyes and the way pity twisted into envy when Sarah passed her. But mostly, she remembered the Alpha's hand never leaving her wrist. Not gentle, not cruel, just certain. Now, standing at the base of Shadow Peak's keep as dawn painted the mountains in shades of blood and gold, that certainty felt like the only solid thing in a world that had shifted beneath her feet. Darian led her through corridors carved directly into the mountain, smooth stone walls that seemed to breathe with ancient power. Torches burned with blue-white flames that smelled faintly of iron and pine resin. Wolves paused mid-conversation as they passed, voices dropping into loaded silence. "She's small," someone muttered. "Human fragile," another said. "She won't last." Sarah kept her shoulders straight, even as exhaustion from the night's run began to settle into her bones. They reached a room, small but clean, high with a narrow window carved into the rock that looked out over the valley. A bed, a wash basin, nothing more. "Rest," Darian said. "You have until noon." He turned to leave. "Wait," Sarah said. He stopped. "The trials," she began. "What should I can't help you," he interrupted. "If I give you an advantage, the council will void the assessment. You have to face this alone. But you can tell me what to expect." His jaw tightened. "Combat with Kara means pain, probably blood. She's been training since she could walk. She's never lost. And the other trials? Knowledge tests your understanding of pack law, history, strategy, endurance." He paused. "Endurance breaks people, even strong ones." Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, the reality of what she'd agreed to finally sinking in. "Why do you do this?" she asked quietly. "Just put potential mates through trials?" "Because Shadow Peak survives where other packs fall," Darian said. "We can't afford weakness, not in our Alpha's mate." "And what if I fail?" His expression darkened. "Then you leave. And He stopped himself. "You fight the council," Sarah finished. "Yes. To keep your position." "Yes." Sarah studied him. This alpha who'd claimed her out of necessity. who'd been brutally honest about his motivations, who now stood in her doorway carrying the weight of his pack's survival. "You could have chosen anyone," she said. "Someone strong, someone who'd pass these trials easily." "Could I?" Darian asked. "Every unmated she-wolf in Shadow Peak wants my position, not me. They'd use the mate bond to gain power, influence, control. And I won't?" "You can't," he said bluntly. "You're too weak to challenge me. I'm too foreign to build alliances, too desperate to risk losing what little you gain." The words should have hurt. Instead, they made a strange kind of sense. "So I'm safe," Sarah said slowly, "because I'm harmless." "You're necessary," Darian corrected, "because you're honest." Before she could respond, footsteps echoed in the corridor. Darian's posture shifted instantly, alpha mask sliding into place. A young wolf appeared, barely more than a teenager, eyes wide with a nervous energy. "Alpha," he said quickly. "The council requests your presence." Darian nodded, then glanced back at Sarah. "Lock the door," he said. "Trust no one." Then he was gone. Sarah sat in the silence that followed, heart still racing. Trust no one. The warning echoed in the stone room. She stood, restless, and moved to the window. In the valley spread below, beautiful and harsh, mist still clinging to the ravines like the breath of sleeping giants. Somewhere down there, Kara Steelclaw was probably training, preparing to humiliate her in front of the entire pack. Sarah's wolf stirred weakly, a flutter of presence barely there. "You're not helping," Sarah whispered to it. The wolf whimpered and retreated deeper. A knock at the door made her jump. "Who is it?" she called. "Thomas sent me." Sarah froze. "Thomas? How would—" She cracked the door open. A young woman stood there, perhaps a few years older than Sarah, with kind eyes and healer's marks on her wrists. She held a basket covered with cloth. "I'm Mira," she said. "I trained with Thomas 2 summers ago before I came to Shadow Peak." She offered the basket. "He sent word ahead. Don't ask me to look after you." Sarah's throat tightened. Even now, even here, Thomas was trying to protect her. "Thank you," she said, taking the basket. Inside, food, clean bandages, a small vial that smelled like the pain medicine Thomas had given her. And a note. "You're stronger than you think. Trust your instincts." Timira lingered in the doorway. "I'm not supposed to help you," she said quietly. "But between us, Kara fights to intimidate. If you show fear, she'll draw it out. If you stand your ground, even when you're losing, she'll end it quicker." "That's still ending with me losing," Sarah said. "Yes," Mira admitted, "but losing with dignity matters here. Shadow Peak respects courage more than victory." She glanced down the corridor nervously. "I have to go, but good luck." Sarah watched her disappear, and then closed and locked the door as Darian had instructed. She ate mechanically. Dried meat, bread, cheese that tasted of smoke. The food settled in her stomach like stones. Then she washed, changed into clean clothes, and waited. The sun climbed slowly toward noon. When the knock finally came, Sarah was ready. Darian stood in the corridor, face unreadable. "It's time," he said. The combat circle was carved into the mountain's flank, a perfectly round arena of smooth stone, open to the sky. Wolves lined the edges, 3 deep, silent and watching. Sarah's heart hammered as she descended the steps. Kara Steelclaw was already there, rolling her shoulders, warming up with casual movements that demonstrated lethal grace. The elder from last night stood at the circle's edge. "Combat trial," he announced. "Nera Kara Steelclaw challenges Sarah of Moonridge." Sarah stepped into the circle. Kara smiled, not warm, not kind, predatory. "Rules," the elder continued. Fight until one submits, falls unconscious, or leaves the circle. Killing blows are forbidden. Everything else is permitted. Sarah's mouth went dry. Both fighters may shift at will, the elder added. Sarah's wolf whimpered. She couldn't shift. Not into something so small, so weak, it would only prove every doubt correct. Kara must have seen the decision in her eyes. Staying human? Kara asked, amused. Brave. Stupid, but brave. Begin, the elder said. Kara moved. Fast. Impossibly fast for human form. Sarah barely ducked, the punch grazing her hair instead of her face. She stumbled back, boots skidding on stone. Laughter broke from the watching pack. Oh, she's already running. Kara grinned. Good. Makes it more fun. She came again. Sarah remembered Mira's words. Stand your ground. She didn't run this time. Kara's fist caught her shoulder. Pain exploded through her arm. Sarah cried out but planted her feet. Another strike. This one to her ribs. Air left her lungs in a rush, but she didn't fall. Kara circled her, testing. You're tougher than you look. You're exactly what I expected, Sarah rasped. Kara's eyes flashed. The next combination was faster. Strike, strike, sweep. Sarah blocked the first, took the second, and nearly avoided the sweep. Nearly. She hit the ground hard, vision blurring. Stay down, Kara said, not unkindly. It'll hurt less. Sarah tasted blood. Her ribs screamed. Her wolf was silent. She thought of 4 ceremonies sitting alone. Or she thought of Darian's brutal honesty. She thought of the council waiting for her to fail. Sarah pushed herself up. The crowd went quiet. Why? Kara demanded. Why keep getting up? Sarah met her gaze. Because I've spent my whole life staying down, she said hoarsely. I'm done. Something flickered in Kara's expression. Then it hardened. As you wish. The beating intensified. Systematic, professional, designed to break without permanently damaging. Each strike landed with precision, testing Sarah's limits, and she kept getting up. Again and again. Blood dripped from her split lip. Her left eye was swelling shut. Something in her ribs had definitely cracked, but she stood. Darian's hands clenched into fists at the circle's edge, his entire body rigid with the effort of not intervening. Kara paused, breathing hard now. You can't win, she said. I know, Sarah replied. Then why? Because winning isn't the point, Sarah charged. It wasn't skillful. It wasn't trained. It was desperate and wild and completely unexpected. She crashed into Kara's midsection, and both of them went down. The crowd roared. They grappled on the stone, Kara easily overpowering her, but Sarah fought for every inch. She clawed, twisted, refused to make it easy. Kara finally pinned her, breathing hard. Yield, Kara demanded. Sarah glared up at her with her one good eye. Make. Me. Kara stared at her for a long moment. Then she stood, backing away. Enough. The elder stepped forward. The trial continues unless... I said enough, Kara repeated, louder. She looked down at Sarah, still sprawled on the stone, bleeding and broken but conscious. She didn't win, Kara said to the crowd, but she didn't quit. The elder studied Sarah carefully. Combat trial concluded, he announced. Participant did not yield, did not flee, did not break. He paused. Status survived. Not passed, survived. But it was enough. Darian moved immediately, crossing the circle in swift strides. He knelt beside Sarah, lifting her carefully. Can you walk? He asked quietly. Can I fly? Sarah muttered deliriously. His mouth twitched. I'll take that as a no. He lifted her in his arms. As he carried her from the circle, Sarah caught Kara's eye. The warrior inclined her head. Just slightly. Respect. Hard won and blood bought. But real. Mira tended her wounds in the small room. 3 cracked ribs, she said quietly, wrapping bandages tight. Concussion, severe bruising. You'll be sore for weeks. But alive, Sarah said. But alive, Mira agreed. When she finished and left, Darian remained. He stood by the window, silent. You didn't have to do that, he finally said. Do what? Refuse to yield. Sarah closed her eyes. Yes, I did. Why? Because if I yielded in the first trial, she said slowly, I'd yield in all of them. I'd yield to everything, forever. Darian turned, studying her with those dark, unreadable eyes. You survived, he said. That's more than most thought you would. Most? Sarah asked. Or you? He didn't answer. The knowledge trial is in 2 days, he said instead. You'll have time to heal. And the last trial? Endurance comes after knowledge. His expression darkened. Rest. You'll need it. He moved toward the door. Darian, Sarah called. He stopped. Thank you, she said, for not lying to me about what this would be. His shoulders tensed. Get some sleep, Sarah. The door closed softly behind him. Sarah lay in the darkness, every inch of her body screaming in pain, and realized something surprising. She didn't regret a single choice that had brought her here. Low drums, wind through stone, a distant howl. Sarah woke to pain, not the sharp, immediate kind, but the deep, relentless ache that had settled into her bones and refused to leave. Every breath pulled at her wrapped ribs. Every movement reminded her of Kara's fists. But she was awake, and she was still here. 2 days had passed since the combat trial. 2 days of healing, of Mira's quiet visits with food and medicine, of watching the sun track across the narrow window as her body slowly remembered how to function without agony. So the knowledge trial was today. Sarah dressed slowly, each movement careful and deliberate. The bruises had turned spectacular shades of purple and yellow. Her left eye had finally opened fully again. She looked like she'd fought a war. In a way, she had. A knock at the door. Come in, she called. Darian entered, carrying a tray of food. He paused when he saw her on her feet. You should be resting, he said. The trial is at noon. I know. He set the tray on the small table. That's why you should be resting. Sarah sat carefully. Tell me about the knowledge trial. I can't help you prepare. I'm not asking you to, she said. I'm asking you to tell me what to expect. Darian leaned against the wall, arms crossed. The council will ask you questions, he said, about pack law, history, strategy, territory disputes, medicine, anything they think a mate of the Alpha should know. How do I pass? By knowing the answers, he said dryly. Sarah huffed a laugh that made her ribs protest. How helpful. They're testing whether you can learn, adapt, think. Darian's expression was serious. Whether you can be an asset to the pack, not just a decoration. And if I fail? Then the endurance trial doesn't matter, he said bluntly. 2 failures mean the assessment ends. You leave. Sarah absorbed that. What happens to you if I fail? Darian was quiet for a long moment. The council moves forward with their challenge, he said. I fight, or I step down. You won't step down, Sarah said with certainty. No. Then you'll fight. Yes. How many? She asked. As many as it takes. Sarah studied his face, the hard lines, the old scars, the weight he carried like armor. You're not afraid, she observed. I've been preparing for this possibility since I became Alpha, Darian said. Fear doesn't change what needs to be done. A bell tolled in the distance. 1 hour until noon. Darian pushed off the wall. Eat, You'll need your strength. He headed for the door. Darian, Sarah called. He paused. I'm going to pass this trial, she said quietly. He looked back at her, broken, bruised, sitting straight despite the pain. I believe you might, he said. Then he was gone. The council chamber felt different in daylight. Sunlight streamed through high windows carved into the mountain, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny spirits. The 5 elders sat along their raised dais, faces carved from stone and expectation. Wolves filled the chamber, more than had attended the combat trial. Word had spread, apparently. The foreign mate who'd survived Kara Steelclaw was now attempting the impossible, proving she had a mind worth keeping. Sarah stood in the center of the chamber, spine straight despite the pull of healing ribs. Darian stood against the far wall, face carefully neutral. Kara was there too, Sarah noticed. The warrior leaned against a pillar, arms crossed, watching with sharp interest. The center elder rose. Sarah of Moon Ridge, he intoned. You stand before the Shadow Peak Council for the trial of knowledge. I do, Sarah said clearly. We will ask you questions, the elder continued. Answer truthfully. Answer completely. Deception or ignorance will be noted. Sarah nodded, and the elder to the left spoke first, a woman with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. What is the first law of Shadow Peak? Sarah took a breath. Survival of the pack, above the comfort of the individual, she answered. The pack endures, even when individuals do not. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The elder nodded. Correct. What dissolves a mate bond under Shadow Peak law? Death of one mate, mutual consent witnessed by the council, or failure of the right of assessment. Correct. What is the penalty for an alpha who makes a false claim? Challenge by blood or combat, Sarah said. The challenged alpha must either prove the claim true or face ritual combat with the challenger. The questions came faster. So describe the hierarchy of pack positions. Name 3 historical battles that shaped Shadow Peak territory. Explain the role of a beta in times of war versus times of peace. Sarah answered each one, drawing from the knowledge she'd absorbed over the years, not from formal training, but from listening. From reading everything she could get her hands on in Moonridge's small library. From paying attention when others thought her too insignificant to notice. The elders exchanged glances. Adequate, the silver-haired elder said. Now we test understanding, not mere memory. The center elder leaned forward. Why does Shadow Peak survive where other packs fall? Sarah paused. This wasn't about facts. This was about insight. Because you value adaptation over tradition, she said slowly. You don't hold on to old ways just because they're comfortable. You change when you need to. You're harsh because the mountains are harsh. You demand strength because weakness here means death, not just for individuals, but for everyone who depends on them. Silence fell. You don't seek to dominate other packs, she continued, warming to the topic. You seek to be left alone to survive on your own terms. That's why you haven't attended mating ceremonies in decades. Why you don't form alliances easily. Why outsiders fear you. She met the center elder's gaze. You're not cruel. You're realistic. The elder's expression was unreadable. Interesting perspective, he said, from an outsider. Sometimes outsiders see things insiders can't, Sarah replied. Another elder spoke. Male, broad-shouldered, scarred. You are weak, he said bluntly. Yet your wolf barely exists. By our standards, you should never have been brought here. Why should we accept you? Sarah felt every eye in the chamber fix on her. This was the real question, the one that mattered more than memorized facts. You shouldn't, Sarah said. Shock rippled through the crowd. By your standards, I'm a terrible choice, she continued. I can't fight. I can't hunt like you do. My wolf is dormant. I bring no alliances, no resources, no obvious strength. She took a breath. But I bring something you need anyway. Which is? The elder challenged. Honesty, Sarah said. Your alpha chose me because I have nothing to gain by manipulating him. No power base to build, no rivals to eliminate. I'm too weak to threaten his position and too foreign to build coalitions against him. She gestured to the assembled pack. And everyone here wants something from him? Favor, status, influence. I just want to exist without being invisible. Darian's expression shifted, something unreadable crossing his features. I'm not here to make Shadow Peak weaker, Sarah said. I'm here to make your alpha's position more secure. Because as long as the council can use his unmated status as leverage, his rule is vulnerable. I remove that leverage. By being weak, the scarred elder pressed. By being irrelevant to power struggles, Sarah corrected. Which, in its own way, is a kind of strength. The chamber was utterly silent. The center elder studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. Small, cold, but genuine. You understand politics better than half my council, he said. He looked to his fellow elders. Any further questions? They conferred in whispers. Finally, and the silver-haired elder spoke. One more, she said, and this one you must answer from your heart, not your head. Sarah tensed. Why do you want to stay? Sarah's throat tightened. Why? The honest answer was complicated, messy, vulnerable. But they'd asked for her heart. Because for the first time in my life, Sarah said quietly, someone looked at a room full of options and chose me, even if it was practical, even if it wasn't romantic. Someone saw me and thought she'll do. Her voice cracked slightly. That's more than I've ever had, more than I thought I'd ever get. And I know I'm probably going to fail the endurance trial. I know I'm not what this pack needs or wants, but I'd rather fail trying to belong somewhere than succeed at being invisible forever. Silence stretched. Then Kara Steelclaw pushed off the pillar. She's honest, Kara said to the council. Stupid, maybe, but honest. The warrior looked at Sarah. I vote she passes. More murmurs. The center elder raised his hand. The council will deliberate, he said. Sarah of Moonridge, you are dismissed until sunset. We will deliver our judgment then. Sarah bowed her head and turned to leave. As she passed Darian, his hand brushed hers. Just for a moment. Deliberate. Grounding. Outside the chamber, Sarah leaned against the cool stone wall and let herself shake. One trial left. One more impossible test. And then she'd know if she'd finally found a place to belong. Or if she was about to lose everything all over again. Deep drums, the scrape of boots on stone, wind howling through the yard. Sunset came too quickly. Sarah stood in her small room, and watching the light fade over Shadow Peak's jagged horizon, the mountains turned from gray to purple to deep indigo, and still no word came from the council. Her ribs had healed enough that breathing didn't hurt constantly. The bruises were fading, but exhaustion clung to her bones, not from physical pain, but from the weight of constant judgment. A knock at the door. Mira entered, carrying a fresh set of clothes. Council's ready, she said quietly. Sarah nodded and changed. Simple tunic and pants in Shadow Peak's colors. Dark gray, like stone, like shadows. Like she was trying to blend into something she didn't quite belong to yet. They walked through corridors that felt familiar now, past wolves who no longer openly mocked her. Some watched with curiosity, others with guarded respect. The combat trial had done that, Sarah realized. She'd lost, but she hadn't broken. And here, that apparently counted for something. The council chamber was crowded again. More wolves than before, pressing against the walls, filling the space with body heat and anticipation. Darian stood near the elder's dais, face carefully blank. Sarah took her position in the center. The center elder rose. "Sarah of Moon Ridge," he began. "You have completed 2 trials. Combat, survived. Knowledge, passed." Relief flooded through her. Passed. "1 trial remains," the elder continued. "Endurance. To begin at dawn 3 days hence." Sarah nodded. Then the elder's expression shifted. "However, the council has additional matters to address." Unease prickled down Sarah's spine. The elder's gaze moved to Darian. "Alpha Darian Ashford, your choice of mate has been unconventional." Darian's posture didn't change. "Shadow Peak law permits an alpha to choose any unmated wolf willing to accept the bond." "It does," the elder agreed. "Yet your choice brings foreign influence to Shadow Peak. It demonstrates a willingness to deviate from tradition." "Adaptation is tradition here," Darian said coolly. "Is it?" The scarred elder stood. "Or is it weakness disguised as pragmatism?" The air in the chamber changed, sharpened. "You claim this mate prevents council challenge," the scarred elder continued. "Yet what does her presence truly demonstrate? That our alpha prioritizes convenience over strength, that he chooses the path of least resistance." "I choose survival," Darian said, voice hard, "yet for myself and for Shadow Peak. By bringing weakness into our heart?" The elder gestured to Sarah. "She barely survived combat with our beta. Her wolf hasn't emerged. Her knowledge is adequate at best. What happens when she faces true danger? When enemies come for the alpha's mate? Will you abandon pack business to protect her? Will Shadow Peak's strength be compromised by your choice?" Sarah's hands clenched into fists. "Perhaps," the elder said slowly. "The council should assess whether your judgment is sound, whether your rule serves Shadow Peak or merely serves yourself." Darian's eyes flashed dangerously. "Are you challenging my authority?" "We are questioning it," the silver-haired elder said, "as is our right and duty." Sarah's heart hammered. This was it, the real test. Not of her, but of Darian's hold on power. "Can I invoke council right of question?" the scarred elder declared. "Let the alpha prove his choice serves Shadow Peak." The center elder nodded gravely. "So invoked. The question will be decided after the endurance trial. If Sarah of Moon Ridge fails, the alpha's judgment is proven flawed. Council challenge proceeds." Darian's jaw tightened, but he nodded once. "And if she passes?" he asked. "Then your judgment stands," the center elder said, "and the matter is settled." For now, Sarah thought. The unspoken words hung heavy in the air. "Sarah of Moon Ridge," the elder said. "Do you understand? Your failure impacts more than just yourself." "I understand," Sarah said quietly. "Then may the mountain test you well." The council dismissed them. Outside, Darian walked ahead of Sarah, spine rigid, hands clenched. She followed him through winding corridors until they reached a balcony carved into the mountain's face. Cold wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of snow and stone. "Darian?" Sarah began. "Don't," he said sharply. She fell silent. He braced his hands against the stone railing, knuckles white. "This is my fault," he said. "I brought you here, put you in this position, made you a target for council politics." "You were honest with me," Sarah said. "You told me what this was. Honesty doesn't make it right." Sarah stepped beside him, looking out over the darkening valley. "The trial was always going to be hard," she said. "This doesn't change that." "It changes everything," Darian said roughly. "If you fail, I don't just lose a mate. I lose my position. The pack faces months of challenges, instability, and potential violence." He turned to face her. You deserve to walk away from this. From all of it. I'll take you back to Moonridge tonight. You can say I released you from the bond. No shame. No failure. Sarah met his gaze. No, she said. Sarah. You chose me, she said firmly. For practical reasons, yes. But you chose me when no one else ever had. You were honest when you could have lied. You gave me a chance when I had none. She straightened her spine. I'm not walking away. Not from you. Not from this. Not from the endurance trial. You could die, Darian said bluntly. The endurance trial has killed wolves stronger than you. Then I'll die trying, Sarah said, but I won't quit. They stood in silence, wind howling around them. Finally, Darian exhaled slowly. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, he said quietly, or the most foolish. Can't I be both? Sarah asked. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Yes, he said. You can. 3 days passed like a held breath. Sarah trained with Mira, learning to control her breathing, to conserve energy, to push past the point where her body screamed to stop. Endurance isn't about strength, Mira explained. It's about will, about deciding that survival matters more than comfort. What happens during the trial? Sarah asked. Mira hesitated. I can't tell you specifics, she said. But I can tell you it takes place in the high peaks, where the air is thin, where cold becomes a living thing, where every step is a choice to continue. How long? Until sunrise, Mira said quietly. You leave at dusk. You survive the night. Or you don't. Sarah absorbed that. Has anyone ever died during the trial? Yes, Mira said. 3 times in Shadow Peak's history. All strong wolves, all trained warriors. She looked at Sarah seriously. Don't try to be strong. Just try to be stubborn. On the 3rd day, as dawn broke, Sarah stood at her window and watched the peaks emerge from darkness. Somewhere up there, she would face her final test. Somewhere up there, she would prove, or fail, everything she'd fought for. A knock at the door. Darian. He looked like he hadn't slept. It's time, he said. They walked together through the keep, neither speaking. Wolves lined the corridors, pack members who'd gathered to witness the departure. Some watched with skepticism, some with pity, a few with something that might have been hope. At the mountain's base, the council waited. And Kara? The warrior stepped forward, but surprising Sarah. You survived me once, Kara said. You can survive the mountain. She pressed something into Sarah's hand, a small stone, smooth and warm. My first endurance trial token, Kara said quietly. It's tradition. Someone who's passed gives something to carry. Doesn't help physically, but it helps, Sarah said, closing her fingers around the stone. Kara nodded and stepped back. The center elder spoke. The trial begins at dusk. You will be taken to the high peaks. Left alone. No food, no fire, minimal clothing. You must survive until dawn. He met Sarah's gaze. The mountain will test you. Cold, fear, exhaustion, pain. The trial doesn't end until sunrise, or until you fail. What counts as failure? Sarah asked. Unconsciousness. Frostbite severe enough to threaten life. Or crossing back over the threshold marker. So she could quit. She could walk away at any time. Understand this, the elder continued. The mountain doesn't care about your will. It doesn't care about your reasons. It simply is. And it will take everything you have. Sarah nodded. I'm ready. They took her up as the sun began to set. Darian accompanied her. One final allowance before the trial began. They climbed for hours, switchback paths carved into steep mountainside, air growing thinner with each step. Finally, they reached a plateau. Bare stone, howling wind, nothing but open sky and distant peaks. The escort wolves placed a carved stone marker at the plateau's edge. "Cross this going down," one said, "and the trial ends. You fail." Sarah studied the marker, then looked out at the vast, empty darkness spreading before her. Darian stood close, speaking low enough that only she could hear. "You don't have to do this." "Yes," Sarah said. "I do." "Sarah," she turned to face him. "If I fail, what happens to you?" His jaw tightened. "I fight." "Then this isn't just my trial," she said. "It's ours." Something shifted in his eyes. Surprise, recognition, something almost like respect. "Survive," he said quietly. "I will." The escort wolves took Darian back down the mountain. Sarah stood alone as darkness fell completely. The temperature dropped like a stone. Wind tore at her thin clothes, cutting through to skin that immediately began to ache with cold. Her breath misted in front of her face, each exhale precious warmth stolen by the mountain. Hours passed. The cold became everything, sinking into bones, making thoughts slow and heavy. Sarah paced the plateau, enforcing movement to generate heat, but each step required monumental effort. Her body wanted to stop, wanted to curl up and rest, just for a moment. That's how they died, Sarah realized. The three who'd failed, they'd probably told themselves, just rest, just for a moment. And they'd never gotten up again. Sarah's wolf stirred weakly. "Stand," it urged. So she stood. Time became meaningless. There was only cold and dark and the burning need to keep moving. Her legs shook. Her hands went numb. The wind screamed like a living thing, trying to push her toward the marker, toward failure, toward the end. She thought of Moon Ridge, of 4 ceremonies alone, of being invisible. She thought of Darian's honesty, of Kara's respect, of Mira's kindness. She thought of every moment someone had looked at her and seen nothing worth seeing. And then she kept moving. One step, another, again. The mountain didn't care, but she did. Somewhere in the deepest dark, when cold had stopped feeling like pain and started feeling like nothing at all, Sarah's wolf finally spoke clearly. Not weak, not dormant. Waiting. For this. Warmth bloomed in her chest. Not physical, but real. The bond with her wolf strengthening, awakening, recognizing the moment. Sarah gasped as power trickled through her veins. Not enough to shift, not yet, but enough to remind her body how to generate heat. Enough to keep fighting. Dawn came slowly. Gray light creeping across the plateau, turning shadow to stone. Sarah stood at the plateau's center, shaking violently, lips blue but standing. The escort wolves appeared. They stopped when they saw her. Shock rippled across their faces. "Ah, she's still up," someone whispered. The center elder climbed the final distance, moving with the careful steps of someone who'd made this journey many times. He studied Sarah, trembling, barely conscious, but undeniably present. "The sun has risen," he said. Sarah's legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees, then forward onto her hands, gasping for breath. But she'd stayed on the plateau. She hadn't crossed the marker. "The trial is complete," the elder announced. Warmth flooded through her as Darian appeared, wrapping a thick fur around her shoulders, lifting her carefully. "You survived," he said, voice rough. Sarah tried to speak but couldn't make her frozen lips form words. So she just nodded against his chest. As they descended the mountain, sunlight spilling across the peaks, Sarah heard the distant sound of howls. Shadow Peak, yelled acknowledging, not mockery. Recognition, low, steady heartbeat rhythm. Wind softens, a distant, echoing howl. Sarah woke to warmth. Real warmth. Blankets piled thick, a fire crackling in a hearth carved into the stone wall. The small room felt like paradise after the frozen plateau. She tried to sit up. Every muscle screamed in protest. "Don't." Darian's voice. She turned her head slowly. He sat in a chair near the fire, watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He looked exhausted. Eyes shadowed, jaw tight, like he hadn't slept since bringing her down from the mountain. "How long?" Sarah's voice came out rough, barely a whisper. 2 days, Darian said. "I've been asleep for 2 days?" "You collapsed after we got back," he said. Healer said it was exhaustion, cold shock, dehydration. Your body just shut down." He stood, moving to pour water from a pitcher. "Here?" He helped her sit up carefully, holding the cup to her lips. The water tasted like life itself. "The council?" Sarah asked when she could speak again. Darian's expression darkened. "Waiting for you to wake up. They want to deliver their final judgment with you present." Sarah processed that. 3 trials. Combat, survived. Knowledge, passed. Endurance, survived. But survival wasn't the same as passing. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you rest," Darian said firmly. "When you're strong enough to stand, the council will convene. Not before." "And if they decide against me?" Darian's jaw tightened. "Then I fight," he said quietly. "Every challenger, one by one, until either they acknowledge my right to rule, or I fall." Sarah studied his face. "You'd really do that? Fight your own council?" "Yes." No hesitation. "Why?" she asked. Darian was silent for a long moment. "Because you survived," he finally said. 3 trials that would have broken most wolves. You survived all of them. He met her gaze. "That deserves recognition, whether the council agrees or not." Something warm unfurled in Sarah's chest, something that had nothing to do with the fire or the blankets. "Thank you," she said softly. "Don't thank me yet," Darian replied. "We still have to face them." 3 more days passed. Mira came regularly, bringing food and medicine, helping Sarah rebuild her strength. The healer said nothing about the trial, but her presence felt like support nonetheless. On the 4th day, Sarah stood without assistance. On the 5th, she could walk the length of the room without trembling. On the 6th, Darian entered at dawn. "It's time," he said. Sarah nodded. She dressed carefully, the gray tunic and pants that had become almost like a uniform. Her reflection in the small mirror showed someone different from the girl who'd sat alone at the Moonridge ceremony. Harder, scarred, still standing. They walked together through corridors that felt different now. Wolves still watched, but the mockery was gone, replaced with something more complex: curiosity, assessment, and, in some faces, grudging respect. The council chamber was packed. Every wolf who could fit had crowded in, lining the walls, filling the space with body heat and tension. The 5 elders sat on their dais, faces unreadable. Kara stood against the far wall, arms crossed. Sarah took her position in the center. But Darian stood slightly behind her, close enough to intervene if needed, but letting her face this moment herself. The center elder rose. "Sarah of Moonridge," he began, "you have undergone the rite of assessment. 3 trials: combat, knowledge, endurance." The chamber fell silent. "Combat," the elder continued. "You faced Kara Steelclaw and survived. You did not win, but you did not yield." He paused. "Knowledge. You demonstrated adequate understanding of pack law, history, and strategy. You answered honestly. You passed." Sarah's heart hammered. "Endurance. You survived the night on the high peaks. You did not cross the threshold. You remained conscious. By measure of survival, you succeeded. The elder looked to his fellow council members. The question before us is simple. Does this foreign wolf, this weak wolf, this unchosen wolf deserve to be acknowledged as mate to Shadow Peak's alpha? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The silver-haired elder stood. She is weak, she said flatly. Her wolf has not emerged. In combat, she would be a liability. In crisis, a burden. Sarah's stomach dropped. Yet, the elder continued, weakness is not always failure. A mate's role is not merely to fight. It is to strengthen the alpha's position through other means. She looked at Sarah directly. You understand politics. You recognize your own limitations. You do not pretend to be something you are not. These qualities have value. She sat. The scarred elder rose next. I oppose this choice, he said bluntly. I still believe strength should be rewarded with strength. That our alpha deserves a mate who can stand beside him in battle. He paused. But I cannot deny what I witnessed. You survived trials that would have broken trained warriors. You did so through will alone, through refusal to surrender. His eyes narrowed. That is a strength we respect here. Perhaps the only strength that truly matters. He sat. One by one, the other elders spoke. Finally, only the center elder remained standing. The council has deliberated, he said, and we have reached a decision. The chamber held its breath. By majority vote, the elder announced, we acknowledge Sarah of Moon Ridge as mate to Alpha Darian Ashford. The bond is recognized under Shadow Peak law. Shock rippled through the crowd. Sarah's knees nearly buckled. Acknowledged, recognized, accepted. However, the elder continued, raising his hand for silence. Sarah tensed. The council notes that your wolf has not yet emerged. Under normal circumstances, a mate bond cannot be fully completed without both wolves present. He studied her carefully. We grant you 1 lunar cycle, 30 days. If your wolf does not emerge by the next full moon, the bond will be reevaluated. Sarah's breath caught. Do you accept these terms? The elder asked. 30 days. 1 month to prove her wolf existed or lose everything. I accept, Sarah said clearly. The elder nodded. Then let it be known. Sarah of Moon Ridge is acknowledged as mate to Shadow Peak's alpha. She is under pack protection. Any who challenge her, challenge the alpha himself. He slammed his staff against the stone floor. This council is adjourned. The chamber erupted into conversation as wolves began to file out. Sarah stood frozen, trying to process what had just happened. She'd passed. She'd actually passed. Darian stepped beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. You did it, he said quietly. I have 30 days, Sarah replied. You have 30 days, he agreed. She turned to face him. What if my wolf doesn't wake up? Darian's expression was unreadable. Then we deal with that when it happens, he said. For now, you're recognized. That's more than either of us expected when this started. He offered his hand. Sarah took it. His grip was firm, grounding, real. Come on, he said. The pack will want to acknowledge you formally. Then you can rest. Formally acknowledge? Sarah asked nervously. A hint of a smile touched his lips. Don't worry, it's mostly ceremonial. You just have to not faint. That's what I was trying to do during the endurance trial, Sarah muttered. Darian's smile widened slightly. You're going to be fine. The formal acknowledgement took place that evening. The entire pack gathered in the central hall, hundreds of wolves filling the vast space carved into Shadow Peak's heart. Torches burned along the walls, casting dancing shadows across ancient stone. Sarah stood beside Darian on a raised platform. trying not to be overwhelmed by the sea of faces watching her. The center elder spoke the ritual words, old language that rolled like thunder, binding her to the pack through ceremony and tradition. Then Darian stepped forward. "Shadow Peak," he said, voice carrying across the hall. "This is Sarah, my mate, your alpha's chosen." He placed his hand on her shoulder. "She has survived your trials, earned your acknowledgement. She stands under pack law and pack protection." Silence stretched. Then Kara stepped forward from the crowd. "I acknowledge her," the warrior said clearly. One by one, other wolves spoke. "Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Acknowledged." The words built like a wave, filling the hall until even those who doubted her had no choice but to add their voices. When the last wolf had spoken, Darian turned to Sarah. "Welcome to Shadow Peak," he said quietly. And for the first time since arriving in the harsh mountain valley, Sarah felt something she'd never expected to feel again, like she belonged. That night, Sarah stood at her window, watching moonlight paint the peaks silver. 30 days. 1 month to find her wolf, or risk losing everything she'd fought so hard to gain. She closed her eyes and reached inward, searching for the presence that had always been there, small, frightened, hiding. I know you're scared," she whispered to it. "I am too, but we survived. We made it this far." The wolf stirred weakly. "I need you," Sarah said. "Not to be strong, not to be powerful, just to be present, to be real." Silence. Then, faint but undeniable, a response. Soon, Sarah's eyes flew open. Her wolf had spoken, not retreated, not hidden. Spoken. "How soon?" she asked, but the presence had faded again, leaving only the echo of that single word. Sarah pressed her hand against her chest, feeling her heartbeat. 30 days. Whatever happened, she wouldn't face it alone. She had Darian's brutal honesty, Kara's respect, Mira's kindness, and somewhere deep inside, a wolf that was finally, slowly beginning to wake. Low drums, a slow, ancient heartbeat beneath the sound. 20 days passed like falling snow, quiet, relentless, accumulating. As Sarah spent them learning Shadow Peak, learning to navigate the stone corridors without getting lost, learning which wolves to trust and which to avoid, learning the rhythms of a pack that valued strength but respected honesty. Darian taught her pack hierarchy, territory boundaries, the delicate politics that kept Shadow Peak independent. Kara taught her to fight properly, not to win, but to survive. Mira taught her healing, herb lore, the small kindnesses that held a pack together. And through it all, Sarah waited for her wolf. Each night, she reached inward. Each night, the presence grew slightly stronger. But it still hadn't emerged. 10 days left. Sarah stood in the training yard, circling Kara with better form now, actual technique replacing desperate flailing. "Better," Kara said, blocking Sarah's strike easily. You're thinking before reacting." "Thinking doesn't help when you're faster," Sarah replied. "No," Kara agreed, "but it keeps you alive longer. Sometimes that's enough." They sparred for another hour before Kara called a halt. "Your wolf still hasn't woken," she observed. "No." "Will it?" Sarah wiped sweat from her face. "I don't know," she admitted. "It speaks to me now, says soon. But I don't know if soon means days or years." Kara studied her thoughtfully. "My wolf was late too," she said quietly. Sarah's head snapped up. "What?" "Not as late as yours," Kara said, "but late enough that people talked. Said I might be human-touched, defective." She smiled without humor. "Then one day someone threatened my little brother, and my wolf woke up. I tore through my skin like it had been waiting for exactly that moment." "What changed?" Sarah asked. I stopped waiting for permission, Kara said. Stopped thinking I needed to be perfect before I could be powerful. Just let go. She gripped Sarah's shoulder briefly. Your wolf is waiting for something. Figure out what, before time runs out. 5 days left. Sarah couldn't sleep. She paced her room, moonlight streaming through the narrow window, anxiety coiling in her chest like a living thing. 5 days. Then the council would reevaluate. Then everything she'd fought for could crumble. A knock at the door. Darian. Can't sleep? He asked. Can you tell? He entered, closing the door behind him. They'd grown comfortable around each other over the past weeks. Not intimate, but familiar. Easy silences. Shared meals. The kind of partnership that came from necessity but had evolved into something more genuine. Talk to me, Darian said, settling into the chair by the window. About what? About what's keeping you awake. Sarah sat on the bed, pulling her knees to her chest. What if my wolf never wakes up? She asked quietly. What if I'm just broken? You're not broken, Darian said firmly. How do you know? Because broken things don't survive what you've survived, he replied. They shatter. You bent. You adapted. You're still here. Sarah rested her chin on her knees. The council will rescind the bond, she said. Probably. His honesty, as always, was both brutal and appreciated. And then you'll fight them, Sarah continued. Yes. Because of politics. Darian was quiet for a moment. Not just politics, he finally said. Sarah looked up. No, then why? He met her gaze, something shifting in his expression, something that looked almost like vulnerability. Because when I claimed you at that ceremony, he said slowly, it was practical, strategic, a solution to a problem. He paused. But watching you face these trials, watching you refuse to quit even when quitting would have been mercy, watching you earn respect from wolves who wanted you to fail. His voice dropped. It stopped being about politics. Sarah's breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying you're not just a solution anymore, Sarah, Darian said quietly. You're... A distant howl cut through the night. Not a greeting, a warning. Darian was on his feet instantly. Stay here, he commanded. He was gone before Sarah could protest. She stood, heart hammering, listening to the chaos building outside her door. Running footsteps, shouted orders, the clash of something violent. Sarah's wolf stirred sharply. Danger. She moved to the door, cracked it open. The corridor was chaos. Wolves running in both directions, some in human form, some shifted. The scent of blood hung in the air. Raiders, someone shouted, from the eastern valley. Protect the keep. Sarah's mind raced. Raiders, attacking Shadow Peak. Now. She thought of staying in her room like Darian had ordered. Then she thought of how many times she'd stayed quiet, stayed small, stayed invisible while the world moved around her. She grabbed a cloak and ran toward the sound of fighting. The main hall was a battlefield. Strange wolves, larger, savage, clearly from another pack, had breached the outer defenses. They fought with vicious efficiency, targeting civilians, overwhelming guards. Sarah saw Mira pinned against a wall, a raider advancing on her. Something inside Sarah snapped. Not fear. Fury. She didn't think. She just moved. Her body hit the raider at full speed, tackling him away from Mira. They crashed to the stone floor, and Sarah felt pain explode through her shoulder as claws raked her skin. The raider snarled, throwing her off easily. She hit the wall hard enough to see stars. Pathetic, the raider spat, advancing. Sarah forced herself up, blood dripping from her shoulder. Mira, she gasped. Run! The healer scrambled away. The raider smiled, clearly enjoying this. He lunged. Sarah dodged. Barely. Kara's training saved her life as she twisted away from claws that would have opened her throat. But she couldn't keep dodging forever. He was stronger, faster, trained. She was going to die. The raider's hand closed around her throat, lifting her off her feet. "The Alpha's weak little mate," he sneered. What a disappointment. Sarah's vision started to gray. Her wolf screamed inside her. "No, not like this, never like this. Wake up." Heat exploded through Sarah's body. The raider's eyes widened. Sarah felt her bones shift, her skin ripple, power flooding through her like a dam breaking. "What?" She shifted. Not small, not fragile, not weak. A silver wolf erupted from Sarah's skin, larger than she'd ever imagined. Power rolling off her in waves that made the raider stumble back. Her wolf's eyes glowed like moonfire. She didn't hesitate. She attacked. The raider tried to shift, but Sarah was faster. Her jaws closed around his shoulder, throwing him across the hall with strength that shocked them both. He scrambled to his feet, I finally showing fear. "What are you?" he whispered. Sarah's wolf answered with a snarl that shook the stone. The raider ran. Darian arrived to find Sarah standing in the center of the hall, still shifted, silver fur gleaming, breathing hard. He stopped dead. "Sarah?" His voice was barely a whisper. She turned, and their eyes met. The bond between them exploded. Not a gentle connection. A tsunami. Every wall they'd built, every careful distance they'd maintained, every practical reason they'd told themselves this was just business. Gone. The mate bond roared to life, undeniable and overwhelming. Sarah shifted back, collapsing to her knees. Darian crossed the distance in 2 strides, catching her before she could fall. "You shifted," he said, voice rough with emotion. "I was angry," Sarah gasped. "He was going to kill Mira. I couldn't." "I know," Darian said. "I know." He held her close, and Sarah felt it. The bond, warm and solid and real between them. Not political, not convenient. Real. "The council," she whispered. "Saw everything," Darian replied. Sarah looked up. The 5 elders stood at the hall's entrance, watching. The center elder stepped forward, studying Sarah with an expression she couldn't read. "A silver wolf," he said slowly. "Dormant," the silver-haired elder added. "Not weak, waiting." "For what?" Sarah asked. The center elder smiled, genuinely this time. "For a reason to fight," he said. "Your wolf wasn't absent. It was protecting you. Waiting until you had something worth protecting." He looked at Darian. "The bond is real," he said. "We all felt it. There's no question now." "Then the matter is settled?" Darian asked. "Okay, settled," the elder confirmed. He addressed the assembled pack. "Sarah of Shadow Peak is acknowledged. Fully, without reservation. Any who challenge her challenge us all." Cheers erupted through the hall. Sarah sagged against Darian, relief and exhaustion warring for dominance. "You did it," he said quietly. "We did it," she corrected. Darian pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "I need to tell you something," he said. "What?" "When I claimed you at that ceremony," he began, "I meant what I said. It was practical, strategic, a solution." Sarah nodded. "But somewhere between the combat trial and watching you refuse to yield, between the knowledge trial and seeing you defend yourself, between the endurance trial and watching you nearly die rather than quit." He cupped her face gently. "It stopped being practical. It became something else entirely." "What?" Sarah whispered. "Real," Darian said. "You became real to me. This bond became real, and I—" He stopped, struggling with words. "I choose you," he finally said. "Not because I need a mate, not because of pack law, but because you're brave and stubborn and honest, and you refuse to quit even when you should. Tears burned in Sarah's eyes. I choose you, too, she said softly. Darian smiled, genuinely smiled, and Sarah realized she'd never seen him do that before. Good, he said, because you're stuck with me now. I can think of worse fates, Sarah replied. He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something precious. The bond between them pulsed warm and steady. Real. Finally, completely real. Soft, triumphant music. Wind through pines, and the sound of a pack settling into peace. 3 months later, Shadow Peak had changed. Not in obvious ways. The mountain still rose jagged and unforgiving, the keep still carved from ancient stone, the air still sharp with wild magic. But something fundamental had shifted. Sarah walked through the main hall, no longer hunched or trying to be invisible. She moved with quiet confidence, acknowledging wolves who bowed their heads in respect as she passed. Respect. Still strange, still surreal, but undeniably real. Alpha's mate, someone called. Sarah turned. A young wolf, barely past his first shift, stood nervously. My sister is sick, he said. Would you look at her? Sarah had been working with Mira, learning healing in earnest. Her wolf, it turned out, had an instinct for it, could sense illness, weakness, and pain in ways that made her valuable beyond combat. Of course, Sarah said. Take me to her. The boy led her through corridors to a small family dwelling. His sister lay fevered, mother hovering anxiously. Sarah knelt, placing her hand on the girl's forehead. Her wolf stirred, sensing. It's just fever, Sarah said gently. Her body fighting off infection. She'll be fine with rest and fluids. She mixed a simple tea from the herbs she now carried, showing the mother how to brew it. 3 times a day, Sarah instructed, and keep her warm. The mother's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you, Alpha's mate. Sarah touched her shoulder briefly. Just Sarah, she said. But the title had stuck. Alpha's mate, Sarah of Shadow Peak. The Silver Wolf. That evening, as Sarah found Darian on their private balcony, the space had become theirs over the months, though neither had formally claimed it. He stood watching the sunset paint the peaks in shades of fire. You helped the Blackwood family today, he said without turning. Word travels fast. Always does? He glanced at her. The pack talks about you differently now. How so? They call you the Silver Healer, Darian said. The wolf who fights when necessary but saves when possible. Sarah joined him at the railing. I'm not a warrior like Kara. No, Darian agreed. You're something else. Something Shadow Peak has never had before. What's that? He turned to face her fully. Balance, he said. I rule through strength. Kara commands through combat prowess. The council governs through tradition. But you... He touched her face gently. You lead through compassion, through seeing people others overlook, through making the pack stronger by making individuals feel valued. Sarah felt her throat tighten. I'm just doing what feels right. That's what makes it powerful, Darian said. He pulled her close, and Sarah rested against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. The bond between them had deepened over the months, no longer just recognition, but genuine partnership. They'd learned each other's rhythms, preferences, weaknesses, had learned to work together, to trust, to build something neither had expected. The council wants to formalize your position, Darian said quietly. Sarah pulled back. What do you mean? They want to give you an official title, recognition as a pack leader in your own right. But I'm not. You are, Darian interrupted. Whether you plan to be or not, wolves come to you with problems. You mediate disputes. You've changed pack policy on how we treat omegas and healers. You've made Shadowpeak softer, in a good way. Sarah processed that. What title? She asked. They suggested Luna, Darian said. First mate, second only to the Alpha in authority. Luna, moon. Sarah thought of sitting alone at that ceremony under the harvest moon, convinced she'd never be chosen. Now they wanted to make her second in command of the harshest pack in the territories. I don't know if I'm ready for that, she admitted. You weren't ready for the trials either, Darian pointed out. But you did them anyway. Sarah laughed shakily. That's different. Is it? She met his eyes, dark, steady, full of faith she wasn't sure she deserved. What do you think I should do? She asked. I think, Darian said carefully, you should do what you've always done. Be honest. Be yourself. Trust your instincts. He smiled. And stop underestimating what you're capable of. The formal ceremony took place under the first full moon of winter. The entire pack gathered in the valley, hundreds of wolves, shifted and human, standing in concentric circles around a central fire that burned silver white. Sarah wore traditional Shadowpeak ceremonial robes, dark gray trimmed with silver thread that caught the moonlight. Her hair was loose, her wolf present and alert inside her. Darian stood beside her, hand warm in hers. The center elder spoke the ancient words, binding Sarah not just to the Alpha, but to Shadowpeak itself, making her responsible for the pack's well-being, on giving her authority to act in the Alpha's absence, recognizing her as a leader in her own right. When he finished, the elder produced a silver circlet, simple, elegant, clearly ancient. This belonged to the first Luna of Shadowpeak, he said. It has not been worn in 60 years. We gift it to you now. He placed it on Sarah's head. The circlet settled like it had always belonged there. The pack howled, a sound that echoed through the valley and beyond, announcing to every territory within hearing distance. Shadowpeak had a Luna, and she was not to be underestimated. After the ceremony, as the pack celebrated with food and stories, Kara approached. Never thought I'd see the day, she said. What day? The day someone like you became Luna of Shadowpeak, Kara said. Then she smiled, genuine, warm. But I'm glad it happened. Really? Really, Kara confirmed. You make Darian better. You make the pack better. And you proved that strength comes in forms we weren't smart enough to recognize. She gripped Sarah's shoulder. Welcome, Luna, officially. Throughout the night, wolves came to pay their respects. Some who'd doubted her, some who'd supported her, all acknowledging what she'd become. When the celebration finally wound down, Sarah and Darian returned to their chambers, larger now, befitting their positions, but still carved into the mountain's heart. Sarah removed the circlet carefully, studying it in the firelight. 60 years, she said quietly. The last Luna died in childbirth, Darian said. The Alpha never took another mate, said no one could replace her. Sarah set the circlet down carefully. Oh, that's heartbreaking. It is, Darian agreed, but it's also a reminder. Of what? That love, real love, is worth the risk. He pulled her close. I didn't expect to love you, he admitted quietly. I expected convenience, partnership, mutual benefit. But, Sarah prompted, but somewhere between watching you face impossible trials and seeing you refuse to be anything other than yourself. He kissed her forehead. I fell in love with my own mate. Sarah's eyes burned with happy tears. I love you too, she whispered. They stood together, the bond between them warm and steady, and Sarah thought about the girl who'd sat alone at that ceremony. She would never have believed this was possible, would never have imagined standing here, Luna of Shadow Peak, loved by an alpha who chose her not despite her weakness, but because of her strength, or the kind of strength that didn't announce itself with claws and dominance, but with stubborn refusal to quit, with compassion that changed minds, with honesty that earned respect. "Ready for the next challenge?" Darian asked. "What challenge?" "Running Shadow Peak," he said dryly. "The Council will expect your input on everything now. Territory disputes, pack law, resource allocation." Sarah groaned. "I should have stayed in Moon Ridge." "No, you shouldn't have," Darian said firmly. He turned her to face him. "You were meant for this. You just needed someone to see it, to give you a chance." Sarah smiled. "Thank you," she said, "for being that someone." "Thank you," Darian replied, "for being brave enough to take the chance." The first full moon run. 3 nights later, when the full moon rose silver and perfect, and Darian came to her chambers. "The pack runs tonight," he said. "Traditional full moon hunt. Will you join us?" Sarah had been nervous about this. Her wolf was still new, still learning. But she nodded. Yes. They descended to the valley where the pack was gathering, wolves shifting, excited energy building. Kara appeared beside them. "First full moon run is Luna," she said. "Nervous?" "Terrified," Sarah admitted. "Good," Kara said. "Means you're smart." She shifted, a huge gray wolf, battle-scarred but beautiful. Sarah took a breath, then let her wolf free. The shift was easier now, smooth, natural, power flowing through her like water finding its course. Silver fur caught the moonlight as Sarah's wolf emerged, tall, luminous, eyes glowing with inner fire. Darian shifted beside her, and his massive black wolf pressing shoulder to shoulder with hers. The bond sang. The center elder in wolf form howled, the signal to begin. The pack ran. Through the valley, up the slopes, across ridges where the air was thin and clean. Sarah ran with them, not struggling to keep up, not trying to prove herself, just running, free, powerful, home. Darian stayed beside her the entire time, their wolves in perfect sync. When they reached the highest peak, overlooking territories that stretched to the horizon, the pack gathered. Darian's wolf tilted his head back and howled, claiming territory, announcing presence, declaring strength. One by one, the pack joined him. Then Sarah lifted her head and howled too, her voice joining the chorus, silver and clear and undeniable. The sound echoed through the mountains, carrying on the wind. And in that moment, Sarah understood what she truly gained. Not just a mate, not just a pack, not just recognition, but belonging. True, complete, hard-won belonging. 5 years later, Sarah stood on the same balcony where she'd once watched the sunset alone, but everything had changed. Shadow Peak thrived under the dual leadership of Alpha and Luna. Their pack had grown, not through conquest, but through reputation. Wolves came seeking asylum, seeking the balance of strength and compassion that Shadow Peak had become known for. The healing center Sarah had established saved lives monthly. The Omega program she'd created gave value to wolves who'd been invisible. The diplomatic relationships she'd built brought stability to territories that had known only conflict. And the pup sleeping in her arms, barely 3 months old, made silver-furred and already showing signs of her mother's wolf, represented a future Sarah had never dared to imagine. Darian appeared in the doorway, smiling at the sight. "She asleep?" he asked quietly. "Finally," Sarah whispered. He crossed to them, wrapping both mother and daughter in his arms. "I've been thinking," he said. "Dangerous," Sarah teased. "About that night," he continued, "at the mating ceremony, when I claimed you." Sarah looked up at him. "What about it?" "I told you it was practical," Darian said, "that I needed a mate to keep the council from challenging me." "I remember. I lied," he said quietly. Sarah blinked. "What?" "The council wasn't going to challenge me," Darian admitted. "I had 2 more years before the 30 winter deadline. I could have chosen anyone, or waited." "Then why?" "Because I watched you sit alone," he said. 4 ceremonies. Unchosen. And something about the way you held your spine straight despite it all. The way you didn't let invisibility make you small. He touched her face gently. "I saw strength no one else recognized. And I wanted to give you a chance to show the world what I could already see." Tears pricked Sarah's eyes. "You claimed me because you saw potential?" "I claimed you," Darian said, "because I saw you, really saw you, when no one else did." Sarah kissed him softly. "Best decision I ever made," he murmured against her lips. "Second best," Sarah corrected. "What's the first?" She gestured to the pup sleeping peacefully between them. "This, everything we've built, the family we're creating." Darian smiled, the full and genuine smile that still made her heart skip. "Yes," he agreed. "This." They stood together as the sun set over Shadow Peak, painting the mountains in shades of gold and silver, and Sarah thought about the invisible girl who'd once believed she'd never be chosen. She'd been wrong, not because someone finally chose her, but because she'd chosen herself, chosen to fight, to survive, to refuse to be invisible anymore. The rest, the mate, the pack, the love, the belonging, had just been the mountain's way of rewarding that choice. The prophecy fulfilled. In the deepest chamber of Shadow Peak, carved into stone so ancient it predated the pack itself, words were written in a language few could still read. The center elder stood before them, holding a torch, reading aloud to the council. "When the silver wolf wakes from long sleep, when the unchosen claims her keep, when strength is found in gentle hands, the mountain's heart will understand. True power lies not in the blade, but in the courage to be afraid and rise anyway." The silver-haired elder smiled. "It was always about her," she said quietly. "The prophecy?" another elder asked. "Yes, the silver wolf who would change Shadow Peak. We thought it meant a warrior, a dominant alpha female. But it meant Sarah," the center elder said. "It meant Sarah," the silver-haired elder agreed, "who changed us not through force, but through refusing to be anything other than herself." They stood in silence, honoring the prophecy fulfilled. Above them, in the Luna's chambers, Sarah rocked her daughter and sang old lullabies her grandmother once sang to her. Songs about being seen, about being chosen, and about finding home in the most unexpected places. And the silver pup, born of a bond that started as necessity and became love, listened with wolf-bright eyes. Learning, even this young, that strength came in many forms, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you could be was simply, honestly, bravely yourself. The end.